Hello, my name is Emmy DeGrappa. Each week, we bring you stories asking our guests the question why. We learn about passion, purpose, and the human experience. Brought to you by Wyoming Humanities with the generous support of the Wyoming Community Foundation. This is What's Your Why? Today, we are talking to artist Jennifer Rife, and she is one of 5 finalists in the Women to Watch exhibition program that features unrepresented and emerging women artists. And we want to talk to her because this is pretty exciting. This is from the National Museum of Women in the Arts, and the National Museum of Women in the Arts is the first museum in the world solely dedicated to championing women through the art. And so, as one of those 5 finalists, one of those 5 will be chosen to be on exhibition in Washington, D.C. in 2024 at the National Museum of Women in the Arts. Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I was so intrigued. And so the first thing I'm going to ask you, and you probably get asked this all the time, but what is art in the middle of nowhere? What does that mean? And is it your website? Is it your art medium? How would you describe that?
Well, it is the name of my website. It's also my medium, I would consider, because most of the installations, the ephemeral installations that I create, I do out in the middle of nowhere. People think that flyover country, Wyoming, Colorado, Kansas, all of us states here in the middle that are sparsely populated are the middle of nowhere, and that there's nothing out here. Well, there's a whole lot of something out here. There's a lot of vegetation. May not be big trees, but we have a lot of sagebrush, as we in Wyoming all know. We have cacti, we have grasses, we have flowers, as we were discussing our gardens earlier. We have a lot of native vegetation. We have wildlife, as we in Wyoming all know. We are outnumbered by cattle and probably by pronghorn. So the middle of nowhere is this vast, wonderful landscape in which I live. It can also be a state of mind. I have done installations in city centers where I felt like I was in the middle of nowhere because it was more of a state of mind.
The other thing, I love that explanation, and that's what I was thinking about because you are from Wyoming, and the way you described it is true. We are such a small population in a big state. And I always think that that's in and of itself very interesting because what we love about our state is our wide open spaces.
Most definitely.
The other thing that caught my eye in reading about your exhibition and the work that you submitted, you say adds and removes objects to leave no trace. What does that mean?
So the objects that I take photographs of that are part of the ephemeral installations that I create out in the middle of nowhere, I create those objects in my studio. And when I go out into the land, I place the objects the way I want the installation to look before I start taking the photographs. And I may be out there for a few minutes, I may be out there for an hour, but I take them all away. So if you think of some of the famous land art pieces that people are aware of by, say, Robert Smithson, the Spiral Jetty and Amarillo Ramp, and some of his famous pieces, and Nancy Holt's Sun Tunnels, and Michael Heiser's The City, which is all in the news right now, or in the art world news, because he's finally allowing people to see it. Those are permanent, and they're permanent on the land. They stay there, and mine does not. I take it away. I'm the only one who gets to experience it. There's not a performative aspect to my work. It's just very much me, the objects, the land, my camera, the weather, and whatever is right there around me.
When you say no one gets to experience it, where do people see your work?
They see my work either by going to my website or when I have it on exhibit, which I then project images of the pieces or of the photographs of the installation. And those too are ephemeral because projections don't last a long time.
And why does that intrigue you as an artist, to put something out there, but it's ephemeral? It's not, someone can't just collect it and take it home.
Right. It appeals to me because I think a lot about time and how time is fleeting or it stands still. And when I'm working out in the land, I lose all track of time. And with an ephemeral installation, it takes up some time, but it disappears very quickly. And also, I don't want to leave scars on the land. So much of what we produce in our consumer society is throwaway. So I like to create art that people are just going to experience for a very short period of time, and that it's more about the process of me creating the work and the emotions I feel while I'm creating the work. And so I hope that when people are viewing the work via a projection, or sometimes I'll print multiples of postcards so people can just take them, and postcards are ephemeral pieces as well. People generally throw them away. I want people to feel something as well. Maybe the work I've done reminds them of something, reminds them of a place or an experience, or maybe it just leaves a question in their minds. And I'm okay with that.
So when you're out in the middle of nowhere, are you out in the middle of a field? Are you in the mountains? What is your locations, or do those change all the time?
They change all the time. A lot of my work I've done while on a road trip going someplace else, and we'll just stop along the way. And I always create on public lands. I do not trespass, so I don't want to get in trouble for that. I've done installations. My favorite places are the plains because I grew up on the plains. I live on the plains. I like wide open spaces in the sky. I have done installations at the salt flats, at the ocean, at Lake Huron, in forests. Forests are one of the most challenging places for me because I'm just not used to so many trees. But they have their own unique feel. So wherever I am, I try to do an installation.
Okay, so let's describe installation. Let's describe what is the piece look like? What are you creating in that moment? Is it a ceramic? Is it metal? What is it?
So I will use whatever materials I think will best carry out the vision that I have. So I have used clay, I've used leather, I've used dried plant materials, I will use metal pieces, old plumbing pipes, just whatever I can find. I use a lot of cast off objects. I have used branches from trees. It just depends. And so I don't think of a specific location when I'm creating objects. I'll just have an idea in my mind. And so I create that in my studio, and I might have a group of pieces of objects that I've worked on, and I just pack them into my car. And when we're on a road trip, I take them with me and see what kind of ideas I might have while I'm out there. And so I'll use those objects to just arrange them in a way that plays with the sense of scale and the sense of space and the sense of time.
Okay, so because I'm really trying to paint a picture of your work for the audience, and
right,
trying to understand it myself, because I'm like, wow, are they life size? Are they small? What is this size of your creation?
They vary greatly. And the the rule I have for myself is that I need to be able to carry the objects to the location and take them out. So, I may drive up with my car, but then if I'm out on a hike, everything has to fit in my bag or on my back, or I have to be able to carry them. That's my rule for myself. I don't want to involve other people or machinery or anything to make it more cumbersome. One of my goals was to have work that was and a process that was very sustainable for me to do on my own.
So, Jennifer, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Lamar, Colorado, in the southeast corner, down near Oklahoma and Kansas, along the Arkansas River.
And what was your journey to becoming an artist?
So my family was a bunch of DIYers. Everything that my parents really wanted, they pretty much made. And so I experienced people making things all the time. My dad welded a most amazing swing set for my sister and I when we were young, and my mom sewed me an incredible tennis bag with no pattern, or tennis racket bag. So I grew up around people just making things, and art just seemed like the most fascinating thing because people created something from their imagination and their minds. And one of my friend's moms painted oil paintings, and I just thought it was magical.
And so did you go to art school after that?
So in my little town, 7,000 people, we did not have art classes in elementary school, and we might be able to take them in junior high and high school. So I did as much as I could, and I just always wanted to be an artist. So I went to the University of Kansas and graduated with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in art history with highest distinction. So I just had to have a creative life.
Oh, that's interesting. What was the piece or pieces that you submitted to become one of the 5 women artists chosen from across Wyoming? I think that's also intriguing. What did you submit?
So this all kind of came as a surprise to me to a certain degree because Tammy Hannawalt, the curator, selected artists and contacted us, and then we each were to submit a proposal of what we would exhibit were we to be chosen for the National Museum of Women in the Arts exhibit in 2024. So I submitted 5 different series of installations, a series of images from installations, let me clarify that would be projected at least 8 foot by 10 foot, along with having postcards printed of those pieces that people could just take freely. And that's how I would exhibit my work were I to be chosen for the exhibition. Is that the question? Does that answer your question?
Yes. And
Okay.
what were the names of those pieces that you exhibited? I mean, that you
I would have to go print out my list for that. So the way I title my pieces is according to the coordinates of the location. And then they're just given a number because I will take probably 200 to 300 images when I do an installation because I can't see most of what I'm doing because of the positions I have to get in. So it's very serendipitous as to how they're going to come out. So the pieces that I submitted were most of them, I believe, taken around the Western United States, but I don't remember the exact coordinates of each one of them.
When you describe your work, which you did, and thank you, I feel like this is its own special medium.
Yes.
It's different, and it's not like you're a multimedia artist, which is what I thought of at first, and it's not, you're not a photographer.
Right.
Combining like sculpture and How do you describe yourself when you talk to people? I want to know that.
It's a real challenge. I describe myself as someone who doesn't really fit into any of the traditional boxes of a medium, because I will use whatever technique or medium I think will help me create the object that I have in my mind. So, like when in college, my studio emphasis was on clay. So I have a pretty good, I wouldn't call it a mastery, but I'm quite familiar with the medium of clay, but I don't use it very much. And so I just figure out how to do what I want to do. I figure that's what most artists do. We have an idea and we figure out how to use the tools at our disposal the best we can to convey our vision. And so it's hard to describe myself as a particular type of artist. So I generally will say that I do conceptual work that is ephemeral installations in the land. And it's a really hard thing to describe when people are used to hearing, like, I'm an oil painter or I'm a potter. And while I am a huge fan of all kinds of art, I have a collection in my house that is quite a variety because of all the friends across the state that I have that are also artists. I just am doing whatever I want. Kind of.
Whatever I want. I like that part. We all want to do whatever we want.
Exactly. It's so I for several years I had created. A lot of people around Wyoming are familiar with my work that was coiled vessels and sculptural objects that fit into the realm of basketry. They were more sculpture and not functional. I don't do functional much because why? I want to do something that's not functional, that just has no purpose other than to be a thing that I made. And I did that for several years, achieved quite a bit of success for me, and had my work in a lot of national exhibitions and in a couple of books and catalogs. And I just reached a point where I wanted to do something that caused me to have more emotion. And that mainly stemmed from a visit to the Spiral Jetty in Utah, where I experienced such an incredible amount of flow. And all creative people know what flow is. And I hope people in general get to experience flow at some point, where you're just so engrossed in something that you lose track of time, you lose track of where you're at, and your world just, it's like you're in a different space. And I wanted to feel that every time I made work. And that's what I've found in creating ephemeral installations out in the land. I mean, there could be a thunderstorm going on around me and I wouldn't know it because I'm just in flow. And so it's been a movement from product to process, and focusing so much on the process of creating that it has to come back around to what kind of artist am I? I'm a flow junkie. I think that's probably the best way to put it. I just want to feel. I want to have emotions. I want to have an experience that I won't forget.
That's very interesting and also really inspiring. So one of the questions that is part of this exhibition is when women artists envision a different world, how does that look?
For me, as a woman artist, and envisioning a different world, I first and foremost, it's one that is more kind and just, less hate-filled, more humane. It's also one where we embrace beauty, aesthetic value, thinking, pondering, curiosity, learning,
Well, I guess we should just destroy the internet then.
Yeah, that's kind of how it feels, though. There is a lot of really good art on the internet where you can, or at least connect with other artists. That's one thing I have found to be so wonderful here in Wyoming. So many of us are connected through the Studio Wyoming Facebook group, that I have friends in every corner of the state. And it's really wonderful because I didn't have that when I moved here in 2001.
Oh, that's intriguing. And so on this Facebook page, the Studio Wyoming, is it all just artists on this page that are just talking to each other?
There is somewhat. Anybody, well, I shouldn't say anybody can join. There are moderators, and you can recommend that people join. I think there are like 500 members of the group or something, where artists will post work that they're showing someplace, or have a question about where you can source some sort of material, and talking about other artists' exhibits, and it's just a really great way to connect and to just be connected, and to know that there are other artists in Wyoming, in all the different corners, in all the different counties, that are working on their craft or their vision just like I am.
Are there any other artists out there? I'm sure there are, but just that have inspired you, that are more invested in the process and the experience, like you said?
I think every artist would probably describe that they're invested in their process, and we all get a thrill out of different kinds of processes. So many artists I know that I know many clay artists that are just so engrossed in their clay work, and that's an experience as well. So I think it's how we each feel doing what we're called to do.
Right. So it's very individualistic, just like art is. You can't create the same piece of art twice,
Exactly.
I love that. Well, it has been so fun to talk to you. My gosh. I'm looking forward to learning who is going to be the artist of the 5 artists that were chosen. You're all so very different, and I'm interviewing each of you and just learning more about you and your art medium and your journey and where you are now. So this has been a great learning experience for me as well.
Well, it's been great talking with you, and I'm so glad that you're doing this. It's such an honor to be part of this whole project, and to see the other artists, and to just the variety of art that we have being created in Wyoming and being created by women artists is really astounding. And I know I am one of 5 representing dozens of women artists here in our state that are doing really good work.
Yeah, I agree. We have so much artistic talent in Wyoming. It is super incredible, and I always love hearing about it.
We really do. I just love being an artist in this state for that reason.
Tell me again, how do people learn or find out more about you?
Well, the best thing would be to go to my website, artinthemiddleofnowhere.com. My work doesn't fit really into traditional galleries as such. I do sometimes exhibit 5x7 photographs, prints that can be framed and sold, but that's not generally what I do. So going to my website, you can see it all.
That's great. Well, it's great talking to you, Jennifer, and thank you so much for your time.
Great talking to you too. Thank you, Emmy.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of What's Your Why? Brought to you by Wyoming Humanities with support from Wyoming Community Foundation and generous supporters like you. To learn more, go to thinkwhy.org, subscribe, and never miss a show.